Hey YouTube, it's Jay. So today we're going to talk about leave zones. Now, or positional zones, sometimes called the leave cone or the leave funnel. And I had intended to do some other videos before I got to this subject. It's an extremely important subject, and I wanted to tell you how to get from place to place before I told you why you were getting from place to place. But about a week ago, a video was put out by one of the other content producers or content creators who has a fairly large following, and in that video he gave some of the worst advice that you could possibly give. Okay, it is a limiting way of thinking about things. Makes things easier at first, but then it makes things worse and worse and worse as you go. So let me introduce this with a little story. So back in the mid-90s, I was one of the better A players in the Tampa, St. Pete area down in Florida. I played all the weekly tournaments at various, you had tournaments that were $10 entry at such and such bar and grill, and the winner got a couple hundred out of it, right? And so I would play all of these things, and I actually supported myself for a couple of years playing those weekly tournaments. I was extremely strong at the local level. But then I took the jump to go on the Florida Pro Tour, Florida Pro-Am. Well, it wasn't called the Florida Pro-Am then. It was called the Florida Pro Tour, and then it was the Florida Pro Open. And that tournament series had some phenomenal players on it. Tommy Kennedy played it, Ray Martin played it, Buddy Hall played it, Alex Pagulayan played some events, Richie Richardson played some events. You had just basically, if you were a pro in the Southeast U.S. And you weren't an international pro, you would play these as fillers in between other tournaments. But anyhow, so I started playing that tour, and as good as I was, I was really strong back then. As good as I was, I started playing these pro events, and I might win a match, but as soon as I ran into one of the well-known players, it was over. And so I would get through one or two matches, and then I'd run into one of them. And sometimes the first match I ran into one of them. My very first one, I got Tommy Kennedy on my second round. But I would run into one of them, and I just could not beat them. And I'm talking about playing these events for years and not beating them, just donating to the tournament basically. And one day I was talking with Ray Martin, who's a friend, and I consider him a mentor. He's definitely given me a lot of really great tips about the game. But we were talking about it, and I mentioned to him, I said, I just don't get it, Ray. I win everything locally, but as soon as I step up to this regional pro tour, I can't get past the first couple of rounds. I'm not even getting close to the money, let alone in the money. And Ray said, well, that's because you play perfect pool. And I said, well, what do you mean? Perfect pool? If I play perfect pool, then that sounds like a good thing to me. And he said, no, what I mean is you try to get perfect position on every shot. He said, what you need to be doing is playing percentage pool. And he introduced me to the idea of leave zones, and even more importantly, he gave me some ideas on how to use them. It didn't take me very long at all. I jumped from where I was to cashing in the Florida events in a matter of a few months of just incorporating this concept. Now there are a lot of videos out there that talk about the leave zones, talk about the concept behind leave zones, but they don't really tell you how to use them. So that's one of the things we're going to do in this video. We're going to talk about not just what is a leave zone. We will talk about that first because it's kind of key that if you haven't been introduced to the concept before, that you understand that before we move into how to use them. So we're going to talk about the leave zones. We're going to talk about how to use them. We're going to do some examples on this table, and maybe break and run a rack or two, and literally analyze every shot as we go through it. And then I may show you some video of some of the higher ranked amateurs that are playing on the Sunshine Pro-Am, the Predator Sunshine Pro-Am Tour today, and show you where they made their mistakes. And they made a lot of them. So first, let's introduce the concept of leave zones.
All right, so this is the leave that we're trying to get is on the 7. Ignore that cue ball. And this is the shot that we're doing to get it there. So the mistake is to try to play perfect position. So the bad advice that's being given is to play perfect position, to pick a spot and say, I'm going to leave the cue ball right there. And that's the gray circle here is where that leave would be. Yes, that would be perfect position, and if you get there, you land with an easy way to get to the 9 ball. But the theory on position zones is that if I'm anywhere inside this area, you can see the darker area there, that I'll have a shot on the 7 and I'll be good. And so rather than trying to play for a point, you're playing for an area. And even further than that, it talks about how to get into the area. So the basic theory is that I do not want to come across the zone like this. That's bad. So this would be the proper way to come into the zone, would be to come in a way that keeps the cue ball in the zone for as long as possible. And we're going to dig into that concept a little bit, that long as possible part. Because we're not talking about distance, we're talking about time, and that's really important. But for now, this is the basic idea behind the position zone, is that rather than coming across the zone, you come into the zone and stay in the zone. So this is what all of the parts of the leave zone look like, and we're going to go through these one by one. Now, don't get the colors here are just colors to show you the zones. Don't read anything into it about red, orange, green, because that changes depending on the shot. So let's take a look at these. So this first part, this yellow, is your straight in line. If you're on that line, your only choices are to go forward or back. You really don't have any angle at all. You want to avoid that at all costs in most cases. In these two areas, the angle is right for a stun shot, and that's out to about 15 degrees to either side of the ball. This is where you would leave the ball if you want your next shot to be a stun shot. So now these two areas, these are your areas that you will want to play for most of the time. Now there's something interesting about this in that depending on the side that you want to move the cue ball in the direction to your next leave, not to the next ball, to your next leave, you are typically better off being on the opposite side. So if I want the cue ball to come to the left, I want to be on the right side of the 7 ball. If I want the cue ball to go off to the right, then I want to be on the left side. Kind of, we all know that, the natural angles. Now, these are where you'll want to be most of the time because they give you the most flexibility in your leaves. Now this red area that you see, these are makeable shots, but you're going to have to let the cue ball go. So unless you're going to need speed to get to the other end of the table, or you're going to have to go 4 or 5 rails to get to a shot, you probably don't want to be in these areas. It's also worth noting on these zones that around the rails there's about a 3-inch area that you do not want to land in simply because you'll be too close to the rail. Sometimes it doesn't matter and sometimes you have to do it, but like on this shot you wouldn't want to be in that 3-inch zone on the near rail because the rail would impede your shot and cut down on your options for the next sleeve. So something else to understand about position zones is there are two things we don't want to do. We don't want to be too close to the ball, and we don't want to be too far from the ball. So your actual position zone is actually about six inches away from the ball. That gives you enough room to follow through on your shot. It also gives you a decent angle. When you get too close to the ball, first of all the zones run together real close to the ball. You may have noticed that in the previous image. Uh, but also, as you get really close to the ball, judging the angle for the shot starts to become harder. Now, the other thing is you really want to be within about 12 inches of the ball. Uh, 12 to 18 inches. Any more than that, and you're starting to have a longer shot. Remember that the further the cue ball is away from the object ball, the more precise your hit has to be. Okay? When you're closer to the object ball, you have more room for error. You have more margin for error. So we don't want to be too close and we don't want to be too far.
All right, so we've talked about some concepts about what the position zones are. Now, this is usually where most people leave off, and they leave it to you to figure out the rest. I want to talk next about the easiest ways to use those position zones. So we always want to opt for the easiest way to make the shot and get in the zone. So by far, the easiest of all of those answers is the stop shot. Dead straight in. Dead straight in, don't have to do anything but stop the cue ball. That is easily the best way to get your position in the zone. And you can do that whenever you have a shot where when the cue ball and the object ball, when the cue ball stops, it will be exactly where you want to be. Okay? Stop shots. Easiest way to get in there. I mentioned before that the concept of leave zones is about time and not distance. Okay? Let me explain what I mean by that real quick before we go further. So, if I have a shot and I have a choice on this shot of hitting the ball and going through the zone this way without scratching, or I can hit it and stun into the zone, the choice that I should make is to stun into the zone. And the reason for that is that when we talk about being in the zone and making use of the positional zones, what we're talking about is it is better to have a slow shot where 80%, I'm making up a number again, 80% of the time that this cue ball is traveling is going to be spent inside the zone. Okay? Than it is to have something where the cue ball spends 20% of its time in the zone, even if it has a better angle. Okay? So shooting fast through the zone, worse than shooting slow through the zone, as a percentage of the time the ball travels after the hit. Now that's way more than you need to know. That's for the purists out there that want to know the actual facts of it. In reality, when we're choosing how we're going to leave the ball, you just want to choose the one that lets the ball roll slowly in the zone and spend as much time in the zone as possible. Okay, so if I have this shot and I'm going to have to cut it in the side, the cue ball is going to move very quickly through my positional zone, right? It's going to just roll through it and out, and so it's moving fast. If, however, I have a little bit straighter angle, now I can hit it and stun and roll through slowly. It's going to be easier to get the cue ball to stop while it's in the position zone. Does that make sense? Okay, so the easiest way to get my leave is to have the straight in shot where the stop shot is going to put me exactly where I need to be for a perfect leave. And so this is the most preferred way to be in the zone, is just to stop the cue ball. Okay? The next easiest way to get into the zone is to stun into the zone. So now we're inside that 15-degree angle. It was green in my diagram before. Now, and that's actually a bad example because it's not the right one. So now we're inside the 15-degree angle. Now we can stun into the position zone. Okay, notice that the cue ball was moving very slowly. That's why it's preferred. Okay, third way to do it. This is the order you should think about these. Third way to do it is to go off the rail. Now, using the rails to control your speed is important. The stun zone, the position zones is all about reducing the need to control your speed perfectly. Let me just throw this out there. There is not now, nor has there ever been, a person with perfect speed control. Let me say that again. There is not now, nor is there ever been, a person, a pool player, with perfect speed control. I'm talking about even among the greats, the Mike Siegel, the Ephraim Reyes, Earl Strickland, today's champions, Fedor Gorst, Joshua Filler, SVB. None of them have perfect speed control. In fact, you see them get in trouble all the time because they overrun a position. Nobody has perfect speed control. What makes them great from a positional play standpoint, well, what makes them great are two things. Number one, they're phenomenal shot makers. Okay? Number one, phenomenal shot makers. So even if they get in trouble, they're going to make shots that I wouldn't even try to shoot. They're going to not only try them, they're going to make them. But second, they know how to minimize the risk that is related to speed control. Okay, now, we all, and I say we, I mean, this is a drill that we used to do. Basically, you would put a piece of chalk on the table, and you would play to end the shot touching the chalk. Okay, that's the way that J. Thomas Reset, one of our subscribers, describes it. Now, I never did the chalk thing. What I did is I want to be within a ball's distance of here. So I would put a cue ball where I wanted to stop, and then I would play my shot to end up touching that cue ball. So that's how I would do it. It's the same basic idea. I'm trying to end my shot where that cue ball is, and if I bump it and it moves a little, that's okay with me. I just want to be right there. That's how I would practice that, is try to get within a ball's distance of this cue ball. It's a perfect pool practice, but for practice purposes, it's fine. But I would never shoot for that type of leave in a game. I would instead play for the angles. And that's because I don't want my leave to be dependent on me hitting perfect speed. I don't want that. For a drill, it's fine to help you get your speed control down, to understand interactions between balls. Perfectly fine. Great drill. Absolutely endorse it as a drill. But in a game, you do not want to be playing perfect speed. What you want to be doing is playing angles. And so the entire purpose of the leave zone, of thinking about it in terms of zones, is to make it so that I can hit this ball hard, I can hit it soft. The rails are going to help me with the speed, because when the cue ball hits the rail, it necessarily loses momentum to the rail, except in a few cases of extreme side spin, where you can actually make the cue ball speed up by hitting the rail. But my whole purpose in playing zones instead of point position getting rid of the point position and playing area position is that I don't want to have to worry about, is my speed perfect? My speed should be able to be good enough, okay? And to do that, you make use of the rails. So our third way to leave in a zone is by coming off a rail and spinning into the leave. Okay, now we've talked about in other videos about stun to the rail, spin to the leave. That's where it comes in, is right here. If I can stop, if I can stop the cue, I'm gonna stop the cue. If I can stun the cue a few inches, no more than 6 inches ever for a stun shot. When you're stunning an open table, don't even think about going more than 6 inches with the cue ball after the hit, because you have to hit it so hard to get it to do it that, as you're going to see a little later, one of the amateurs in the video that I'm going to point out some things on does exactly that. Tries to stun it for 12 inches, falls dreadfully short, and as a result, he actually wins the game, but not because of that shot. So our third way is to hit the rail. Our fourth best option, I'm going to call it down the funnel. Okay, now let's say we have a shot like this, okay? Well, I can take that and shoot it, and the cue ball rolls down the line, staying in the lead zone. Perfectly fine. Now, the closer those two balls are together, the 7 and the 9, the harder this is to execute properly. My third way, or actually not my third, my fifth way is up the funnel, okay? So that means instead of coming this way into the funnel, I'm going to come this way into the funnel. And that's why I don't like calling it a funnel, because a funnel implies that you're always going this way. Into the lead zone by coming back. Now we're coming up the funnel, and if I overhit it and I come all the way up here, doesn't matter, I've still got my shot, right? Okay, number 6, across the funnel. So by now you have realized that this is really a bad idea, coming straight across the funnel. Now if you do have to go across the funnel, you always want to come to the wide end of the funnel. So going like this across the leave zone, okay, is much less preferable than shooting that harder so it comes off the rail and out through the wider part of the zone. Okay, same basic angle, and I'm a little bit back from where I was, but it's better to come out here because now I've got all this area. So here, I've got from here to land in, out here, I've got from here to out here. Okay, and the final one, point position. This is the worst of all of the cases. You do have to do it sometimes. Sometimes you'll have something like this. Okay? Actually, it would be, these two would be the other way around. So you have something like, say, this, right? You can't stop it. If you roll it forward, you're going to run into the pocket. You're going to have to cheat the pocket to keep from doing that. And this leave zone is only this wide, so you're going to have to land it in about 4 or 5 inches. I'm not going to say those shots don't come up, but because they do. But as a general rule, that is the worst of all options. Is to try to leave the cue ball in a specific point. If you find yourself saying, I have to leave it right there to have a shot, you shouldn't be taking that shot. If you are saying, I have to hit this, make it, and stop the cue ball right here, or I will not have a shot, then you should not be shooting that shot. I don't care how easy the shot is to make, you should not be shooting that shot because it requires perfect speed. And as I just said, there has never been a player who has had truly perfect speed. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't opt for another way. I mean, you could always opt to shoot it up in the corner and force follow off the rail and over for the lead. But if your shot is to shoot the ball in and you have to leave the cue ball right there. If it's here, it's bad. If it's here, it's bad. But if you leave it right there, you can shoot. If you're trying to pull off that shot, you're making a mistake. Okay? Plain and simple. We are going to talk about things like bump leaves, which is what I would do in this case. I would run into the 9, move it out of my way, and just shoot the 2 because it's a natural shot. But if you find yourself saying, I have to leave the cue ball right there, you should not be shooting that shot. You should be looking for a different way to get the lead. You should be opting for a different shot, or you should be playing safe. You should not try to play perfect pool. That's how players get in trouble. That's how the pros especially are really prone to this because they have so much confidence in their ability to control the speed that they might try this shot. The greats would not try to put that in the side and hold the cue ball up. They would either run into the 9 or they would find a way to go around those balls and remove the risk of speed. So leaves are all about speed zones, leave zones are all about speed control, removing the risk of faulty speed. And the easiest ways to get to them, in order, the ways to get to them are stop the ball, stun the ball a few inches, go off a rail, go down the funnel, go up the funnel, down the funnel, up the funnel, go across the wide portion of the funnel, and then finally point position. So that's how this all works, and it's all about mitigating the risk of faulty speed. Will you be able to do this sometimes? And is it necessary to do point position sometimes? Yeah, sometimes it is. It's very rare that it's actually required to do point position, but it does come up. And it does come up where it's easier because it's a stun angle to do a point position than it is to go around the table. Those do come up. You have to make that decision, and that decision is going to be based around what your shot making ability is. If you're a great shot maker, then you can opt for a worse position than a bad shot maker can. Or a lesser shot maker, I should say. Understanding positional zones and understanding how to use them is going to make a huge difference in your game. Now, this video is run extremely long. You'll notice I'm not wearing the same shirt I was wearing in the other one. This total video is over an hour long. I'm cutting it into pieces. This is going to end the first piece. What I'd like to do next is we're going to do some examples. We're going to think through some things. And then in the third part, we're going to do some analysis. And we're going to add some things in the next one about making use of these zones and shot decisions that you're making related to the positional zones. How to decide, hey, should I shoot this in and try to go around for the 2, or should I slow roll it and just come out and take the harder shot on the 2, or should I run into the 9 and use that for position? We're going to talk about how to make those decisions in the next one. So with that, I'm going to let you go. We will see you next time. Don't forget, like, subscribe, ding the notification bell. By the way, side note, if you made it this far, I'm curious whether YouTube is putting advertisements in these videos. I have not monetized these videos. I'm making nothing by doing this. But I'm curious whether YouTube is sticking ads into these videos. If you could, just let me know down in the comments. I will tell you that lately I feel like there's an oversaturation of advertising. You know, it used to be you had one ad, you watched it for 5 seconds, and then you hit skip. Then it was the unskippable double ads. Well, no, then it was the unskippable ads, and I remember one time I got a 2-hour ad that was unskippable.